What I'm going to be talking about today is based on this book, Hardwiring Happiness by Rick Hanson, Ph.D. And to me, what's so exciting about this is that science is finally coming up with what we've been teaching in New Thought for years, hundreds of years, and mystics for thousands of years. And science is finally catching up to that and explaining maybe to us why that is true. That when we change our thinking, we can change our lives. We can change what happens to us, how we interpret our lives. So everyday positive experiences have the power to change our brain and therefore our lives for the better. And one of the ways we do that is to take in the good by transforming those very brief, fleeting, positive, joyful experiences into lasting improvements that he says will change our neural net worth, because he's coming from the scientific perspective. And I really like this book because there's a lot of analogies in here that most of us can understand, even if we don't understand all of the science that's behind it. One of the things he talks about is imagining our mind like a garden. And even if you're not a gardener, I think you can understand what he's talking about. Now, we could look at the flowers and the weeds in the garden without judging them and without changing anything, right? Or we could choose to pull the weeds and thus decrease what is negative in our thinking. Or we could then further plant more flowers and even increase the positive in our mind, our thinking, our way of being. So in other words, we could let be, let go, and let in. 3 simple steps. Now, as any gardener will know, and it makes common sense, that if you don't replace those weeds with flowers, the weeds will come back. And same with our mental garden. If that garden fills up with flowers, then there's no room for the weeds to grow. So it's the same kind of analogy that most of us can understand when we look at the physical world. Same thing happens in the mental, emotional world. Now, we're not only growing flowers in our minds, we're growing new neural circuits in our brain. In other words, we are hardwiring happiness. And that reminds me of a story that I heard recently about a preacher who had a 5-year-old daughter who would always sit in the front row at church on Sunday. And she noticed that her father, before he gave his sermon, he would fold his hands and look up like he was praying to God. So one Sunday she asked her dad if that indeed was what he was doing, was praying to God before he gave his sermon. And he was very glad, very happy that she had noticed that. So he thought, oh, what a great teaching moment. So he told her, yes, indeed, he was praying to God to help him give a very wonderful, inspiring, uplifting sermon. But the little girl was puzzled. She said, well, I don't understand why he didn't answer your prayer. So, like I said, we don't always have to understand, these scientific neural things that are going on in our brains to understand the concepts that I will be talking about today. Because we can bring more happiness into our lives when we become more aware of what is going on in our lives. Now, unfortunately, our ancestors, in order to survive, evolved what was called a negativity bias, which makes it like Velcro for those bad experiences, but Teflon for the good ones. Now, this negativity bias really is not our fault. You know, it's nothing that we did. We're not responsible. We didn't create it. But there is something that we can do about it. Of course, this negativity bias creates two problems or challenges. It increases the negative and decreases the positive. So that's where being aware and mindful comes in. That's why it's so important. Because our experiences and how we interpret them do make a difference. They do matter. Our attention is sort of like a combination spotlight and vacuum cleaner. It highlights what it lands on, and then it sucks it into our brain, regardless if it's good or bad, you know, for better or worse. Maybe you've heard the expression that neurons that fire together, wire together. Again, this is a thing you don't have to understand, but we might think of it as building some tracks in our mind for our experiences, like, a track around the field that we run on. And so the more we run around that track, the deeper the grooves become. And guess what? If it's because of negative experiences, that's what's going to be so challenging and difficult to change. But if those are for the positive experiences, the happy experiences that we have in our lives, then that's a good thing. We can create more of that. So the brain seems to be good at learning from these bad experiences, but bad at learning from the good ones. Because of this negativity bias. So it's very important for us to be mindfully aware of what is going on in our everyday life. Now, to go along with this, something bad about a person is better remembered than something good, which is why those negative ads seem to dominate the political campaigns. Have you noticed that?
Oh, no.
They have. And like I said, obviously most of you would probably agree with me that I'd rather hear why I should vote for a candidate rather than not vote for his or her opponent. But they've figured out that we tend to listen more and take in more the negative than the positive. So we need to get good at taking in the good. And it's like marking a path in the woods that when you decide to come back, you can follow that same path and you won't get lost. There's a lot of great analogies in this book that really relate to our everyday lives. So we can start by appreciating the little things, because we have more control over the little things that seem to happen in our lives. Now, Dr. Hansen has this program that he has developed with the acronym HEAL, HEAL. The H is for have a positive experience, whether this is something, in the foreground or in the background of our awareness, a positive experience. E is for enrich it. So he's encouraging people to stay with this positive experience for 5 to 10 seconds if you possibly can. And then A, absorb it, so that that experience sinks into your entire body, not just in your brain and maybe your heart, but your entire body. Like we just witnessed this gentleman dancing around and being happy. Wouldn't you like to live your life like that? I know I would. And then the L for heal is link the positive and the negative. And he says this is optional because sometimes just dealing with the positive and becoming aware of it is challenging enough for us, especially in the beginning. Then we can maybe link some negative material that might be related to this positive experience so we can discard it and replace it. Replace the weeds with the flowers, basically, is what he's talking about. But like I said, the whole key is to be mindful of what is going on moment by moment, staying in the present moment. Now, when something becomes difficult or uncomfortable, like having, back to the garden analogy, if there's a storm in the garden, we must first be with the experience, observe it, and accept it for what it is. In other words, let be. Second, when it feels right, we can begin to let go of the negative that has happened. Remember, let go, second step. And third, when it feels right, we can release and replace that negative with something positive. Let in. So we're going to let be, no judgments, let go of the negative, let in the positive. Sounds pretty simple, but not always as easy as it sounds. So taking in the good can become a regular part of your life. It just is going to take a little practice. And of course, you're going to have to be very deliberate about it in the beginning, but then pretty soon it will become automatic. He uses a lot of examples in the book, and this is one of the ones that I really enjoy. He said, why not take an orange? And as you start to peel the orange, break through the skin, stop for a moment, close your eyes, and breathe in that sweet scent. Hold that in mind and recognize that you are the first and possibly only person to see inside that particular orange and taste its fruit. I had never thought of it like that before. But what a unique, positive experience that can be, just eating an orange. Now, he says, although this experience will probably last less than a minute, it can have an enormous positive effect on your mood. And it might even lead you to try that same kind of exercise with other foods that you eat or activities that you do every day. Because we need to strengthen our awareness to bring in the good or the happy in our lives. Taking in the good is a way to be active rather than passive. Like being a hammer rather than the nail. Which would you rather be? I'd rather be the hammer, to tell you the truth. And like I said before, it's the little things that we have the most influence over. Now, we can't do anything about what has happened to us in the past, other than maybe learn from it and try to transform the negativity into something more positive. But we do have the power to take in the good in the present, moment by moment. And obviously, the more we do it, the better we will become skilled in that practice. Maybe you've heard the proverb that says, if you take care of the minutes, the years will take care of themselves. I think that's a good one to remember. So what matters is not the event or the situation or the circumstance, but our experience of it, how we interpret it, how we feel about it internally. That is what is going to make the difference in our lives. And there's some scientific proof, if you want to get into the science, it's in here, about why that is true. So when those storms do come, we can refuse to worry about them more than 3 times about something you can't do anything about, And that means that 3 strikes and the worry is out. Because there's nothing you can do about it. Another one of the suggestions he has is to start what he calls a good year box, or you might want to use a good year journal on New Year's Day. So every day you put a note in the box or writing in your journal about something good that happened that day. And then you can read all those notes or those entries in your journal the following New Year's Eve. So it's an exercise that can help you day by day become more aware of the good that is happening in your life. Take it in, feel it, don't gloss over it. Oh, it's okay. No, take the time to really enrich the experience, absorb the experience into your life, into your neural network. And of course, you can learn to reframe your experiences. I'm sure you've all heard of that concept of finding the positive meaning in a negative experience. And I had the opportunity not too long ago to turn a negative into a positive. Now, I don't always let people know that I'm a great grandmother, because it really makes me feel old. Sorry. But I had no control over that. And I love my great-grandkids, don't get me wrong there. But a couple months ago, my 5-year-old great-grandson said, "Grandma, you are a great grandma." And I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not that old. And then I thought, oh no, what he's saying is I'm wonderful, I'm awesome, I'm loving, I'm fun to be around. That's how I turned that seemingly negative experience into a positive. And that's what we're talking about. We just need to be more aware of how we bring these experiences into our lives. Another way you might look at it is to take a glass of clear water, and if you put a drop of oil, like olive oil or whatever, the oil will stay on the surface. It doesn't get absorbed into the water. But if you take another similar glass of water and you put in a drop of food coloring, it eventually gets absorbed in the water and changes the color of the water. So the oil represents a fleeting experience that really doesn't integrate itself into the rest of our thinking, our mind, our cellular essence, while the food coloring represents a tangible change, one that, may take a little bit of time to sink in, but makes a change that you can see and maybe other people can see as well. So we need to remember to let be, let go, and let in. That will increase the wisdom of choosing a greater happiness over a lesser one, because there are obviously lots of experiences, both positive and negative, that happen to us during the day. And we have to be sure and be aware of our brain's negativity bias that makes us particularly changeable or susceptible to those negative experiences. And of course, the most positive experience we can have is love. But that's a subject for another day. Sorry, guys. I guess you'll have to invite me back for that one. So one of the things he also suggests is setting yourself a trigger that will help you be more mindful. Such as when you're driving and every time you stop at a stop sign or a stoplight, remember to bring in the good. Remember to bring in the positive, to change a negative into a positive. So that's a totally neutral signal that can help you remember what we were talking about today. Or maybe every time you walk through a doorway, whether it's like at work or a friend's house or at home, when you're, going room to clean, or to gather the laundry, or to pick up your reading glasses off the nightstand. Now that's as long as you don't have those senior moments that say, now what did I come into this room for? Oh, shoot. Oh, I know. It's to add more steps to my step counting app on my wrist. Yes. So you can turn that negative senior moment experience, and I know it doesn't happen to anybody but me, into something more positive. It's entirely up to you. So then you can change your brain to be Velcro for the good experiences and Teflon for the bad. So if you'd like to join me now in a few minutes of meditation. And I encourage you to start by taking a couple of deep breaths. In, hold for a second, and release. Allow yourself to relax. Allow yourself to be here in this present moment. And allow yourself to reflect on the music, the message, the fellowship, the positive experience from being here this morning in this loving spiritual community. Let be, let go, let in. Take the time and the awareness to heal, having a positive experience, enriching it, absorbing it, and linking positive to negative. Let in the good in life. reframe negative into positive. And know that as we do this for ourselves, we do this for each other and for the entire planet. We bring about the happiness, the joy that is the truth of our being. And we radiate it out into the world. For this is our spiritual truth of wholeness and of healing. And so I give thanks that each of you are here today to take this lesson, not only for yourselves, but for family and friends. And maybe even just acquaintances, somebody in the line at the grocery store. To be that beacon of light and love, healing, happiness, and joy. And so I ask you once again to take a couple of deep breaths. Bringing your conscious awareness back into this room where we celebrate life, God, Spirit, and each other. Thank you, and so it is. Amen.